All right, let's get started. A very good morning to everyone here at the Boao Forum for Asia. Welcome to this high-level dialogue, Investing for the Future. Are we ready? Of course, question mark. We're going to try and answer that question mark today. My name is Michael Wang. I am with China Global Television Network, or CGTN. Let me make some brief opening remarks first, and then we'll get the conversation started. I think, first of all, we know, of course, this year's Boao Forum for Asia, the main theme is about shaping a shared future. And I think, of course, this is a very powerful aspiration, a very pertinent, consequential one, especially in the times that we are living in today. We meet, of course, also at a moment of profound change, which might be an understatement. We also, I think, live in a time of great paradox where the challenges that we face as humanity, whether it's climate change and how that might impact our societies and economies, whether it's technological disruption and how that might impact our societies, whether it's about addressing development challenges for the still billions of people on the planet that needs development and higher standards of living. All of these require collective action, but it's happening at a time precisely where we are seeing responses perhaps fragmenting more than we like. However, I think despite all of this complexity and uncertainty, we understand, hopefully, that long-term investments, whether it's in capital, whether it's in people, institutions, and trust, these long-term investments cannot happen in isolation, right? We need openness, we need some modicum of stability. We also need, crucially, cooperation, no matter how high level that may sound, and hopefully we see cooperation with a competition managed effectively where competition and cooperation does not veer into conflict. All right, so investing for the future, again, this is not just about how we allocate capital to the most promising sectors, although that is absolutely important, but it's about how do we invest in trust, in institutions, and human capacity, in nature itself. So this is what this dialogue is about. Let me introduce our fantastic panelists who will be joining us in this dialogue. To my left is Mari Pangestu. Mari is the Vice Chair of the National Economic Council of Indonesia. Mari, you are also Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto's Special Envoy for International Trade and Multilateral Cooperation. I like how this title combines trade with multilateral cooperation. I think that's an important link. Next to Mari, we have, of course, Jean-Pierre Raffarin, who is the former Prime Minister of France. Bienvenue, Monsieur le Premier Ministre. Next to him is Mr. Paolo Gentiloni, who is the former Prime Minister of Italy. And Mr. Gentiloni, you were also the former European Commissioner for Economy as well. Andrew Forrest is, of course, a longtime friend of the Boao Forum for Asia. He is the executive chairman and founder of mining giant Fortescue. Andrew is also the founder of Australia's largest philanthropic foundation, Minderoo. And Jack Perry is chairman of the 48 Group. Of course, Jack carries on over 7 decades of engagement between China and the United Kingdom. Jack is also the executive chairman of LEC Robotics. So welcome to all of our panelists. How this session is going to be structured, how this dialogue is going to be structured is I will be asking a very simple and brief question with regards to this topic in terms of, are we ready to invest in the future? We're going to have some very brief answers from our panelists, and then we're going to get into our interactive discussion, and hopefully I will leave around 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, we'll see, for audience questions, because I really want all of you here in this room to get the full value of our high caliber panelists. So let me start with Mari first, a very simple and yet not so simple question. Are we ready to invest in the future? If so, why so? If not, why not?
Yes, we are.
There we go.
Okay. Yes, we are, and we have to be. There are challenges, but there are opportunities. So we have to be ready to be able to avail the opportunities, and it's going to benefit us as a region as well as other parts of the world.
Fantastic that we start on a note of optimism. Mr. Prime Minister, next to you.
I shall try to speak English, but my English is just like my Chinese, Mama Hu. So, I would like...
Mr. Prime Minister, your mic. Let's turn that on. There we go.
We are not ready enough. We miss leaders, young and modern leaders. Who is a modern leaders? A leader is a professional of movement, of changing, professional of culture, knowledge of the others, and to be a professional of peace. And I think we miss leader. So we are not ready enough.
Okay, so Prime Minister Chavarron, not ready enough. We need more leadership. Prime Minister Gentiloni, over to you.
Yes, we are ready, provided that we have 3 or 4 things. The first is peace, and we have to deal with 2 illegal wars, one in Ukraine and the other one in the Middle East. Then we need predictability to invest. Third, we need sustainability. And finally, we need people. Not only human capital, but also the welfare of people and a good mix between demography and migration. So we need leadership, as the Prime Minister was saying, but we need also framework conditions to work on.
Right, we need the foundations, I guess, to invest for the future. Andrew, over to you. Are we ready to invest for the future?
Look, I think absolutely, certainly. I want to pick up on the excellent comments of 2 Prime Ministers. Fossil fuel is a weapon of war. Renewable energy and the industrial transformation we're going through, I don't call it an energy transition, I call it an industrial transformation. That is a weapon of peace. And all the world is ready for a new energy, new products, new steels, which are all weapons of peace. We're ready.
I like that term, weapons of peace. Jack, over to you. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's hard. Am I on?
No.
I think it's hard to be ready for something that you don't know exactly what it is. And I think innovation in technology is moving so rapidly that it's very hard to pinpoint what it's going to be. I think we just mentioned stability. Stability is the one thing that we look for in investment, and it's very hard to invest long-term when you've got regional wars and confrontation happening like we're having at the moment. So I think we have to really continue dialogue, and that dialogue has to turn into action, but governance on that is very important.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Jack. Of course, we are just getting started when it comes to the technological disruptions that we are seeing. Mari Lim, come back to you, and let's get to our longer form discussion. Let's start with Asia. So with all of this fragmentation that we see, tariffs, complexity, uncertainty, what do you think is the right strategic response for Asia and perhaps for ASEAN and East Asia to really be ready to invest for the future?
Yes, thank you for that question. First of all, I want to wish Boao Forum for Asia a happy 25th anniversary. I was here for the first one, and I'm so happy to see how it's grown. And the important role it plays, especially today when we are facing so much uncertainty, but also opportunities to cooperate, which is, I think, the intention of the Boao Forum. So to answer the question around how can we be ready for the future, how can we future-proof Asia and have a shared future, I think we have to start with what needs to be done now in the short term, but that has to serve as foundation for how we will respond in the longer term to all the challenges and the opportunities. So it's not just challenges, but there's also opportunities. So the challenges is, I would say, this time is different. I've been saying this for some time now. We don't think about coming back to a world that we knew what it was like before. It's going to be different. We have slow global economic growth. We have the economic security nexus very much in place. It's not just in time, but just in case. Interdependence is seen as a vulnerability now, no longer as a source of prosperity. And of course, we have the retreat of multilateralism on the economic front as well as on the security front. And we still face the existential threat of the climate crisis, as well as the challenges of the technological disruption and social issues that we all face in each of our countries. And of course, we have the conflict that is ongoing right now, leading to the energy security question again. But there are opportunities in the diversification of the regional value chain that's going to happen because of the geo-economic pressures, and it's in goods and services and people movement. We have demographic changes in this region where some countries will need talent, will need people to come, and others have the supply of the people. We have the acceleration of the energy transition, as pointed out by Andrew just then, and it is going to be the renewable energy as new sectors of growth and also a way of doing business, because sustainable supply chain is already now part of competitiveness. And the retreat from the US that we see now and the issues we have to face with the US, no more hegemon. It is a multipolar world, but it's actually an opportunity to accelerate new ways of cooperation. So my main message is that this time is different. Therefore, your response cannot be business as usual. You've got to do and say the right thing. At the national level, hopefully in unity, in concert with others. I'm going to borrow a word from APEC from 20 or so years ago. Unilateral, concerted unilateralism, which is you do things unilaterally, but you do it together with others, and then you have confidence to move. And of course, collectively within different regional and other platforms. What does this mean to, what are the new ways of cooperation, in line with the title of the forum? Let me share with you what has happened with ASEAN last year in terms of how we have been crafting our response. So very briefly, first you have to recognize the economic and security nexus. And the way you define the security, how you manage resilience and secure and resilient supply chain that doesn't affect the competitiveness aspects of the global value chain. That's one area. And it requires foreign ministers to talk to economic ministers. You cannot be talking in silos anymore. You've got to be talking together. And second, how do we craft our response? First, we have a three-pronged strategy that we developed. First, you have to deal with the US, no matter you don't like the way the US is treating us unilaterally. So we agreed that each one of us will negotiate bilaterally, because the US will not negotiate with us as ASEAN anyway, but we shared some principles. First principle, do no harm. So what you do, you should not do it at the cost of your trading partners. Second, you try to find common positions where it's very harmful what the US is asking you to do, such as containing China, for instance. We have to resist because it affects us very much. So that's the principles of negotiating bilaterally. And we have to navigate also our relationship with China at the same time. As ASEAN and China, we need to really navigate a positive game relationship. Second, we have to build, how do you respond to risk? You build domestic resilience and regional resilience. Domestic resilience is about domestic reforms. Regional resilience is about strengthening your economic cooperation, starting with the regional frameworks you already have in place, which is ASEAN, and the one that includes China is the RCEP. It has the 10 ASEAN countries, plus China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. And leaders last year called for accelerating and strengthening the regional cooperation. And this is also the call from the private sector. We did a survey of the private sector last year, and the feedback from them is that we can deal with the uncertainties, but we will diversify, we will use technologies better, but we will continue to invest in the region. But what do you need from government? We need governments to do the reforms domestically, and we don't need any more agreements or aspiration. We need you to effectively implement the regional agreements that you have in place. So that's the homework for us, and in the context of RCEP, it is about removing the barriers to trade and investment, and working on the issues that does not allow you to have the regional supply chain. I won't get into the technical details, but there are very specific areas of trade and investment reforms that are needed in the regional context. And it is also about the emerging issues, the green and the digital cooperation and collaboration in a win-win way. And then finally, the final prong is all the ASEAN countries and all the RCEP leaders last year reaffirmed their commitment to the WTO and the multilateral rules and disciplines. And what they want to do is to have an agency role in the WTO, in the reforms that it's doing, participating in plurilaterals, which is the way to go to have some multilateral outcomes, and to participate in what we call coalitions of the willing, where you have areas of cooperation which is still undertaking it using the multilateral principles, but it's a subset of countries. And this is where we can identify some areas for new cooperation. And I would say just a final word on the new cooperation, especially in the new areas like green energy transition and so on. There's a new area for industrial cooperation within our region, given the complementarities that we have in the region. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Mari. Let me quickly ask you about maybe the mood here in Asia, because you mentioned that despite all of this uncertainty and complexity that we see, the general mood is still cooperation to try and resolve and manage these differences. And based on what I'm seeing right now, despite all of this fragmentation or uncertainty, it doesn't seem like Asia, ASEAN, or East Asia will resort to protectionism to deal with these differences. Can I conclude or safely say that we will try and manage our differences not through protectionism?
I think that was very clear from the beginning of last year. You know, as soon as we got hit with the reciprocal tariffs, I think we all agreed that the way to go is not to increase protection against each other. The last time this happened, it led to the Great Recession, right? In the 1930s, when the US raised tariffs and then everybody raised tariffs. So a trade war doesn't serve us, will not serve us. And in fact, we have shown using our analysis that if you just face the US tariffs as it is, it's going to have a negative impact on you. But if you actually respond and de-risk by increasing your regional cooperation and integration, therefore increasing the trade and investment you're doing with each other, you can offset that negative impact from the US. So that's why we have been really, I think that there's commitment to accelerate the regional cooperation and integration in a win-win way, in a collaborative way.
Hopefully we'll talk about the RCEP later on in the dialogue. Prime Minister Khaifahong, let me come to you, because you have certainly witnessed the transformation of the international system, right? From the start of the Cold War all the way to the surge in globalization, and unfortunately now to fragmentation as well. Give us maybe the long arc of history perspective in terms of how you see the tensions we are facing today. What should we be cognizant of based on the history of what you've seen to be better prepared to invest for the future?
Well, hard question. I'm not so optimistic right now. I was always optimistic, but right now, the situation is quite difficult. You know, the world is very changing everywhere, very strongly. The rule of law is weak and force is stronger. We believe, when I was young, we believe with a beautiful world, with rule of law, with good international organization, with the United Nations, with WTO, they will make international rules. And now, what I see, force is a king. Everywhere where we have a leader. I think there is a leader in China. There is a leader in Turkey. There is a leader. It seems to be a leader in the United States. Everywhere. But maybe in Europe we miss a leader. Maybe in Africa we have not leader enough. And the most difficult thing is that the leadership is also changing. We need to have new leaders. It's not the same leaders that 20 years ago. 20 years ago, a leader is a man who is a good speaker, very beautiful man who can talk with strong message. Now, we must be a little bit more clever. We need to be more smart. We know technology, and we have not to speak too much. Some leaders are talking too much. Yes, we think of the same people. So we need to have a new leadership. This leadership is very important because we miss leaders in a lot of countries. Because a leader is not the number one, it's in all the countries. At each level, we need leaders. Maybe at personal level, I need to be leader of myself. It's not so easy. And we need to have a new leadership. What is a new leadership? Firstly, I think is a leadership of moving. If you stop, you're dead in this world. You have to move every day. Every day it's changing. You have talked, lady, about green changing. We have talked about digital economy. We have talked AI and so on. Everything is moving. We need to have very mobile people. Firstly, we have to be professional to move. To move for myself, but to be able to move with you. My followers are to be in move. So my job is to have a move with you. But I need to have target. There is no move without target. There's vision without future. And I need to have also the way to get the target. So I have to promise you a destination, I have to promise you a way, and I have to promise you the group must stay unified, together. If we are not together, we can move together. So this leadership is very important. Firstly, to understand that we need to move, and don't be afraid by move. Don't be afraid by change. Never be afraid. Afraid is the beginning of the death. We need to have a very good taste for the future. Don't be afraid of the future. That's a professional of moves. That's what we need. Young leaders, don't be afraid for the future. Secondly, we love the future. Secondly, we have to love culture and to know that education is the main point. You know, my country, beautiful country, best country. I love this country. I love France.
Prime Minister, I think you need to speak into the mic. Speak into the mic to get your, we can feel your passion, but we need to get the mic.
Yes, I want to be closer with the public.
Can I adjust your mic then?
So, when I talk about love, excuse me, but maybe we have some problems. Our last three presidents, Mr. Macron, Mr. Hollande, Mr. Sarkozy, have never been in China before being president. It's crazy. They don't know what China is. And maybe the same thing about Indonesia. It's very important to understand people, to know people. We are making international politics without knowing people. Knowing, I have seen one of President, I don't say his name. He was in Sharia. Oh, so beautiful. Oh, extraordinary, magnifique, yes. Yeah. It's like that for 30 years. So, first, we need knowledge. And in France, we don't know a lot of countries and a lot of civilization. And I don't talk about American senators. They have no passport. So they are talking about the world, they are leaders of the world, but they don't know who is the world. So new leaders have to speak English better than me. New leader has to know education, civilization, and it's very important. And thirdly, a new leader must know what peace is. No, the peace don't fall from the sky. Peace is a work. Peace is very hard work. And we need to have this education of peace. In gymnasium, in all the question of education, we don't speak about peace. But peace, you know, is it's a twinning sister with violence. We begin by violence and the end if a war. You know, when you talk like some leaders in the world, just like the American leader, with a lot of brutality, you talk very strongly. I can't believe you! You're wrong! You are not good people. And that's the beginning. After that, you go to the Congress. Come with me. Come with me. You follow me. I need to, not too much, few people, very motivated. And we go to the capital. And then we were very strong. And at the end, violence is warring. And at the end, that's war. So we need education. There is no good issue with war. Always war is a fail. So we need to have education with very young people. You can defend what you are, but you have to respect the other. Okay, you have to exist. You can exist. You can talk strongly, but respect the other. And I think that we need an education. So my question now is that we need new leaders with new quality, of course, to be very strong about quantic economy, to the digital economy, internet and so on. We need to have this knowledge. We need a big education for new leaders. You know, I very feel that Europe has a lot of quality. Europe is a beautiful union. Europe is a very good construction. But in this world, without leaders, it could be difficult to have discussion with everybody. We need a leader in all organizations. And our organization is very complicated because economy in the hand of Brussels, the Commission, and politics in the hand of the nation. Now, when we talk with other leaders, they have in the same hand economy and politics. So we need leaders who can have in the same hands economy. And so we need to have a thinking of new leadership, and we need to have education for a new leadership, a leadership with this changing world. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you for that, Prime Minister Raffarin. A very passionate speech about the importance of leadership for investing in the future. I think you raised a really good point in terms of more engagement, I guess, with China, global leaders' engagement with China, because I think China's message has been extremely consistent, that this country is willing to work with any partners that wants to work with China. That message of openness has been very, very consistent. And especially as the world's second largest economy, as we look through some of the major development points from the 15th five-year plan, I think there are tremendous opportunities for many companies around the world to come and leverage the China market, either in terms of final consumption or making them more competitive, which I'll ask Jack in a moment. But thank you for that, Prime Minister Raffarin. Prime Minister Gentiloni, let me come to you. Is there anything you would like to respond to Prime Minister Raffarin? And then also I would like to ask you, many countries now are focusing on these terms of sovereignty, resilience, security. Different countries define these terms in different way. We have to face this reality, but we also need to face the reality of the importance of multilateralism as well. So how do we ensure a truly multinational international order despite all of these tensions that we currently see?
Well, first of all, let me thank Prime Minister Raffarin for his words and also for his passion, because we need this. On our world situation, of course, we all see that things are changing. We have tariffs, trade wars, what someone called the weaponization of the world economy. So you use your economic strength as a weapon against other countries, against other global players. Does this mean that we are at the end of the globalization? No. This is my view, not at all. By the way, if we look to trade, trade is not decreasing. So all this confrontation, all this tension, all this weaponization of the world economy is not killing globalization. It is changing the way global economic relations are going on. And the strange fact is that since 20, 30 years, especially on the initiative of emerging economies, we have been discussing the need to reform our financial and economic institutions at global level. IMF, World Bank, all the Bretton Woods architecture. But at a certain point, there is also the risk that in the near future, we will miss this kind of architecture. Because also an architecture that needs to be reformed, to be changed, is better than no architecture, than no order. So what could we do in this new geopolitical situation where for sure there is a link between economy and geopolitics, economy and security, economy and force, which at least my generation never seen at this level. Of course, we had wars in the past, but in the last 50, 60 years, we are not accustomed to this kind of fight and of use of the economic relation to fight. What should we do? My view is very simple. I think that waiting and working for a new order, for a new possible balance of power, what we should do is to try to preserve the factors of order and of multilateral balance that are still there. Because if we address United Nations saying that United Nations is too weak, I think nobody in this room will not agree with the fact that United Nations are too weak. If we address the limits of WTO, for sure, WTO, also because of the American decision not to renew the structure of WTO in recent years, has been rather weak. And as I said before, IMF, the World Bank, a lot of old structure. But when we work for a new order, we should preserve what we have. So if I have some message for this very exciting forum, this audience, Asia, is we should try to work together, especially Asian countries and Europe, to preserve what we have in multilateral terms. Very important, starting with WTO, which is, of course, something we are very interested in. What is linking us? The fact that we give to trade, to export, enormous importance. This is the reality of the European Union. This is the reality of ASEAN. This is the reality of China. So if we work to keep free trade going, if we multiply free trade agreement, as the European Union has been trying to do in recent months, in this new environment, I think we are doing what is needed at the moment. But of course, then we will have to work for a new balance, a new order. And maybe this is for the new leaders Prime Minister Raffarin was referring to. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Prime Minister Gentiloni. Maybe afterwards we can talk about what EU's strategic autonomy or its goals to achieve strategic autonomy means for cooperation between Europe and Asia and Europe and China. But hold that thought for a second. Andrew, let me come to you. And let's talk about investing more in a sustainable future. Because if we have, let's say, the global majority, the global south, all developing and reaching a per capita GDP to the same level as many of the advanced economies that we see today, that's clearly unsustainable if they do it in the same way that many of the industrialized countries did right now. So clean energy, sustainable energy has got to be on the agenda. Give us an overall sense of where we stand in terms of investments in clean energy, despite all of these headlines that are focused on AI, that are focused on geopolitics. Climate might be taking a backseat right now, at least in the headlines, may not be in reality. So where do we stand on renewable energy? And then I'll follow up with your killer app idea in just a second.
Okay, thank you, and once again, Prime Minister. Thank you, and once again, Prime Minister Mary. I really appreciate being on this panel. It's anything but entertaining. It's thoroughly entertaining, Prime Ministers Marie. I'm looking forward to my friend Jack also speaking. I'm a board member of the Boao Forum, and we have to compete for your attention so that at the very least we should do is be able to provide entertaining, thought-provoking speakers which give you a sense of where the world is going and don't torture you with boring, repetitive speeches. I won't be one of those, okay? I'm simply saying to you, yes, let's look at the international order, let's look at the global order, but it does come down to a single person, you. What are your choices? The choices which we've made is to, and I do say this, believe what someone does completely. You can believe mostly what they say, I'm sure, but you can always believe what they do. Fortescue's an incredibly competitive company in the global mining industry. In the king of mining, iron ore, it is the most competitive. We operate the lowest cost in the world and have done since we started. And we're not going fully green. We're not eliminating 1 billion litres of diesel, 1 billion litres of diesel a year because we're woke, because we're climatologists, ecologists. I am, but that's not relevant. We're business people, we're scientists, we're engineers. And we've made the decision to remove those billion litres over the next few years, not few decades, next few years. You'll see the world's first green grid emerge next year. Baseload 24/7 energy, 100% green for a massive industrial company which is going to hold its reputation as the highest performing company in Australia's stock exchange history and the most competitive mining company in the world by going green. And this puts the lie, and I can't stress this puts the lie that fossil fuel is the only alternative. I love what the Middle East is doing. You just watch the Middle East, once again, watch what they do. The UAE, the other great Arabic countries, Saudi Arabia, they're going hard green. They're using their fantastic sun, wind and other resources to go hard green. Why? Because it's the only source of energy out there which, once you've paid off your capital, is nearly free. Now, you don't get that in oil and gas. Even if you paid off that monumental capital, the maintenance cost is massive. Just keeping the show running is massive. They're huge chemical plants. When a missile hits Las Raffarin, it doesn't hit a mechanical device which you can fix. It hits a chemistry set. And I want to bring you to the three truths of why you are ready, world, for this new energy transition. One, speed to market. That's everything with new technology. We will complete the first green grid in a couple of years. It's a big grid. It's measured in gigawatts of generation, that's thousands and thousands of megawatts, and gigawatts of storage, and solar and wind in large scale. We're laying 4,000 panels per day. We'll lift that to 50,000 panels per day. This is an energy generation permanent system which the world has not seen, ever. The speed at which it's getting implemented in Australia by Fortescue. And it's technology, ladies and gentlemen, we can share easily with the rest of the world, and it's not particularly proprietary technology. We just had the courage to do it. And I know business leaders around the world will watch Fortescue with new energy. Of course, it's decarbonised. It's a dirty word. It's friendly to climate. Don't tell Donald Trump. He completely dismisses science, unless it's computer science, and then he's quite happy with science again. But the science around climate change is irrefutable. It relies on more physics than computer science, and it's mathematical. Emissions, despite our optimism on this panel, emissions are rising at a record rate as I speak. It's not sustainable, ladies and gentlemen, but that isn't the news. The news is going fully green is absolutely with us on an economic basis. The second great parameter, if you're breaking in with new global technology, is capital cost. Now, when we measured what it took for Fortescue to go upstream with its own energy, even if we were given a massive gas deposit, which is offshore Western Australia, not far from us, we weren't going to be given it, but we just assumed we'd be given it by the government. The capital cost of doing that, my friends in the oil and gas sector said, yeah, this would be about right, was not much change out of $18 billion to supply us with all our upstream energy. When we calculated back in 2022, the capital cost to go fully green was $6.2 billion. That's a $10 billion saving. And now we go forward to 2026. Numerical terms, don't worry about real. Numerical terms, we're still at 6.2 billion, and we're nearly finished. That is a massive capital cost advantage. And of course, I've touched on operating cost. So speed to market, capital cost, operating cost. And operating cost is the really big one. If you compare yourself to the renewable energy sector and you're in the renewable energy business, you're making a mistake. Do what the Middle East is showing us. They are exporting their fossil fuel. It's expensive. You're still buying it. Go figure. They're going hard green. Very clever. And they're doing it because the operating cost of creating that energy is so cheap for their citizens. So I say, world, you are ready for the industrial transformation. You are ready for new energy. The leaders we've spoken of are there, but at this stage they are held out by conflict of interest. I can't labour those three words more than I am. Conflict of interest is keeping nations around the world from listening to their younger leaders, Prime Minister Rafferan. Conflict of interest is keeping them from changing. Enlightened, courageous leadership is pushing through this and saying, well, we're going green because it's better for our citizens. It's better for the world, but it's certainly better for our citizens. I'm saying to everyone, look at the bottom line. If you care for your voters, if you care for your taxpayers, if you care for your shareholders, you will know your company, your country is ready for energy sovereignty, for energy independence. And I say to every leader in the room, companies are sovereign. If you're not energy independent, you're not independent at all. The Straits of Hormuz has shown us that. And just to leave you with this, the war in Iran is showing us that the energy transformation is now absolutely urgent, and for every responsible leader, you should be doing it now. Iran has had as many decades as Ukraine has had years to become absolutely resilient to attack. If the threat to remove power systems across Iran goes ahead, Iran's response will perhaps not be surgical this time, and it will get worse. So, ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to enact the courage, to enact the determination, and to act for your citizens. New energy. Thank you very much.
Great. Andrew, don't turn off your mic yet. I just want to follow up real quick in terms of how countries might achieve that energy independence, because you've recently said that the killer app for the 21st century is solar plus battery storage. And I was wondering if you could just quickly expand for our audience why you are so bullish on that combination.
Look, we're seeing solar panels emerging around the world. Our technology, which we're developing in Australia and Europe and Britain, as well as here in China, is really accelerating the efficiency of solar panels from 23%, we can see now going up to 40%. That's a massive increase in the efficiency of a solar panel, and we're designing them for tropical environments where it's cloudy, cold environments like Europe, and superheated environments like, say, the Middle East or Australia. So they're becoming highly adaptive. Batteries, tipped me from being the world's biggest proponent of hydrogen. We will still need hydrogen for fertilizers, shipping fuel, for everything. But as a storer of energy, as a battery in itself, you cannot anymore compete with the efficiency we're getting in batteries around the world. The energy intensity in a battery, the ability to store so much energy in a small space and then release it. The intelligence of a battery, you can tap into any batteries now and literally see what it's telling you as to how to run it, how to get the best of it, how to extend its life, and when to recycle it and how to recycle it. A battery can tell you that, like a little brain. So I'm seeing all this technology now linked to artificial intelligence. Now, a sun shining on a huge solar panel bank is very efficient. A cloud goes across it, everything changes at light speed, literally at light speed. A human mind cannot manage that, but AI can. AI acts at the speed of light. So the breakthrough we've seen in AI now means you can manage a grid with solar panels and batteries.
Great, thank you for that, Andrew. Jack, let me come to you and let me ask you more about China's innovation ecosystem. So we've seen tremendous investment of this country in terms of investing in innovation, in technology, in R&D. I think last year China's R&D intensity came in at 2.8%, which was higher than the OECD average for the first time in history. Talk to us about what all of these investments that China is making in terms of innovation. What does that mean for China's high quality development, what it means for China's opening up, and perhaps what are some of the challenges from this as well?
You know, listening to everyone speaking, it's too exciting not to comment on everything that everyone's saying. This is brilliant. Just on what the Prime Minister talked about, leadership. Leadership is about having the courage to tell the truth. That's someone that's insightful enough to say, this is what I'm seeing. That really, to me, is leadership. If you look at the strategic power in the world, it's changing, and it's changing dramatically. And people don't like change, especially the ones at the top. If you look at trade, and you look at what has happened with the tariffs in America, everyone says, okay, the Americans have caused a lot of trouble, instability here. Now, if I look at it from the China perspective, if I was China and I wanted to diversify more, and I decided to take a lot of my trade outside of America, the media and America would have attacked China greatly. But because of the tariffs, China were allowed to diversify their relationships all around the world, and no one said a thing. If they did that, everyone would have attacked them. But now China have relationships in all different countries, and China don't just leave relationships, they stay in them. I know if they're tough, sometimes we'll disagree, but they'll stay in those relationships for many, many years. So you won't see this pullback straight back into America straight away. This is now a new shift in diversification and stability, which obviously what we're seeing in Iran and many different areas right now. I think you're looking at 52 different countries having some sort of war this year. I mean, we're talking about 2, 3, 4 countries, but that's 52. That's a ginormous amount, and that's instability, so you must have that diversification. When you're looking at the new world order, what does that mean? What is it? This is going to be a completely different world. And you only know that if you're able to have the access. Our family goes back 3 generations with China. My grandfather was the first person to trade with China in 1952 in our company, London Export Corporation. A year later, we did the first trade agreement with China by 48 Group. So I've been able to look or hear what China's progress has been over 3 generations. And it's been tough. It's been exciting. You look at a country that's taken 1 billion people out of sheer terror, and now they're a leader in so many areas. But this new world is built on, and Andrew was talking about it, it's built on energy, which is the power, quantum, which is the speed, AI, which is the brain, and then robotics, which is the implementation. And when we started looking into that generational shift that we've had as a family, the needs of China in the 50s was trade. The needs in China in the 70s and 80s was joint ventures and technology coming into China. And that's what our company came. So we decided, how can we be a positive influence and actually have a business long-term in the generation now? And that's technology. So when I looked at that, I thought to myself, okay, energy is a very interesting one. Obviously, that is the whole power and lifeblood. We went through the shifts. Robotics is an interesting one because I believe that we're going into a huge recession and a depression, because the shift to be able to go from one world to another is never easy. And that can cause a huge amount of unemployment, especially with AI technologies and robotics, which is companies are going to rely on, which they're not at the moment, because in the West, you can't just fire your staff when you feel that it's coming. In China, you can do, in the essence of moving and shifting. You have a long-term approach. In robotics, it's different. The robotics, you've had to prepare for a long, long time. Humanoid robotics, everyone's looking at it and saying, why is the focus in humanoid robotics? And I was one of those people. I didn't really understand it until I realized solving the technical problem and finding that solution in humanoid robotics is the key to that technology in robotics. But actually, no one really cares about robotics. No one really cares about humanoid robotics because it doesn't help companies save their bottom line. In recessions, companies let go of about 5 to 10% of their staff. And about 6 years later, they're taken back. This is the last time that will happen. They'll be replaced by AI technologies and robotics for the first time. And that will cause a huge unemployment. So countries have to be very, very ready for universal credit for about 4 or 5 years. It's exciting, but it's also terrifying because a lot of people are going to lose their jobs in innovation. When it comes to robotics, we realize that there is a hardware-software problem. I thought, personally, you take the hardware and you go abroad and you plug in the software and off you go. Off you tootle and everything's fine. That's not the case. It's about fine-tuning, localization of data, and that's a whole nother thing. So the areas from robotics is, R&D, innovation, manufacturing, localization, fine-tuning, distribution, after sales. These are many different areas in this. China have been the leader in innovation in technology. But the big problem is, because the West, as I mentioned, are not allowed to adapt at the speed, they're not saying what their demand is and wants. So those things are not being made. You have to understand the companies over here, like Andrew in mining, and another mining company asked us, they said, we would like a scanning device that can go in, stay steady, to be able to take the pictures for a long time. No one's doing that because no one is asking for what they want, and it takes 2 or 3 years for that to be really refined. So the process of the evolution of technology is about people that are aware and brave enough to say, this is how it is, this is what is going to happen, and that, for me, like the Prime Minister said, is leadership, which is honesty and what you can see.
Thank you for that, Jack. Also, don't turn off your mic. Yes, round of applause. Jack, I do want to follow up quickly on robotics. So have you heard of this term here in China called the New Three? The 新三样, as it's called here in China. So it's basically China's ability to scale solar panels, EVs, and batteries. And with your work in humanoid robots and what this country is doing with robotics, I'm wondering if this New Three can potentially turn into the New Four. What is your outlook on the capacity and ability of China to scale humanoid robotics at scale, deploy at scale into real-world situations? Because this is the world's largest market when it comes to real-world applications.
Yeah, so just on that, and this is sensitive, this is what the Prime Minister was talking about, just being able to say what's true. That humanoid robotics, I personally believe, is that key. It's not the implementation. So you've got now the technology. In China, no one else in the world can manufacture. President Xi Jinping talked about high-quality development, new productive forces, high leveling opening up. And then people ask me, what are China looking to do? I said, he's telling you what you're doing. He's not making pens and T-shirts anymore. They're focusing in high-end manufacturing that needs tech to make it move. The Americans are great at innovation, but they cannot scale in this area. There is no other country in the world that can scale in manufacturing. It is too difficult. If you look at the rare earth minerals, when the Americans wanted to go to Greenland, they don't have the tech to get it out. The Chinese do. So the Chinese are going to be the leaders in this area, but it's about understanding what the wants and demands are of the West. So the communication in technology, in robotics, needs to happen. And I tell you, you'd be shocked. There's not many companies, our company, LEC Robotics, is in this field, and there's not many that can bridge the gap of knowledge of what a company wants and understanding how it works in China on manufacturing, R&D, the process, the difficulties in it. China will be the leader in this area, but it does need communication.
Okay, thank you for that, Jack. Mari, let me come back to you, and let's bring the conversation back to regional frameworks. And specifically, I want to ask you about the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. Where do we stand in terms of implementation of RCEP? How do we strengthen RCEP? Even if it does seem a little bit slow, do you think it's a little bit slow in terms of, even if it seems a little bit slow, I think we need to take into account of the fact that we did create this massive free trade area that spans from Beijing all the way down to Wellington, right? So I think Henry Kissinger, when he wrote early in the 1990s that he was aiming for a large, massive free trade area spanning from Anchorage, Alaska, all the way down to Santiago and Buenos Aires. That hasn't happened, but here in this part of the world, we did do that, right? So that is an accomplishment. Where do we stand on RCEP? How do we get that going faster? And how do you see China within the RCEP framework and China as a demand for ASEAN companies?
Yeah, thank you for that excellent question. You mentioned Wellington. I just came back from Wellington
That's a long flight.
last week to discuss about RCEP, because the joint, what they call the RCEP Joint Committee, is made up of Indonesia as the co-chair always, because Indonesia is, I guess, the founder of RCEP within ASEAN, and the dialogue partner. This happened to be New Zealand this year. And we talked about what leaders called us to do last year. Leaders met, the RCEP leaders met last year to call, to recommit to openness and multilateralism, and to call for the effective implementation of RCEP and to accelerate what's called the general review, which means, how do we improve and accelerate what needs to happen in RCEP. So I think the political will is there. Now let's talk about the how-to. I think there has to be movement on the effective implementation. Without getting too technical, RCEP was created with the objective of growth. So, trade and investment is the means to growth. It's about growth for the region and prosperity for the East Asia region. And it was intended to consolidate the ASEAN +1 free trade agreements, which are in place. What needs to happen is this consolidation, because right now the ASEAN countries are not using the RCEP because they can still benefit from the +1s. Whereas China, Japan, Korea are using RCEP because China, Japan, Korea do not have a free trade agreement between each other. So what needs to happen is what we call, you've got to remove what they call the tariff preferential, so the different tariffs in the different agreements, they need to become one tariff level. Second, what they call the rule of origin. If you want to have cumulative regional supply chain, you've got to be able to add, basically, all the different value added in the different RCEP countries. That's when you can really achieve the regional value chain, including in the areas that Andrew mentioned, in the renewable energy area. And that's the changes in terms of the technical things that have to happen. And then second is the implementation, the institution setup, and that governments need to really deliver on seamless flow of goods, services, and people, right? The new thing that we found from the business sector was that not do we only need movement of goods and services, we need to have people movement. We need to have talent and skill to be able to move, especially in the new emerging areas. You know, you want to be able to have the movement of skilled people across the region. So I think that's another area. And then all the emerging issues such as, we think that a Green Deal for East Asia is really ripe for implementation. And we can start with renewable energy just because that is top of mind of all leaders right now. I think energy security, cooperation in energy, whether it's diversification of sources, as well as the notion of sharing of reserves. We have ASEAN +3 rice reserves, which was created right after the food crisis in 2008. Yeah, we have another crisis here. We could certainly think about an ASEAN +3 plus the other three partners in, the other two partners in RCEP to have shared energy reserves. So you draw on it in an emergency, right? And that can really help just as in the financial sector, you have Chiang Mai Initiative and so on. So it's regional cooperation to deal with crisis, to deal and cooperate. And then when you're not in a crisis, how do we develop the ability to be able to withstand and diversify and become more independent of external dependency on various things, including energy.
Great, thank you for that, Mari. Prime Minister Haverhon, let me come back to you and get your take on the longer relationship between Europe and China in particular. How do you see this relationship developing as we manage our differences constructively? How should we think about this from a long-term perspective where this relationship can be mutually beneficial despite differences, and hopefully the European and China relationship can eventually become a global public good, if not it is already?
That's a very important question right now. And the French president has just decided to make a study to anticipate what will be the link between France and China in 2040. Without Trump, without Ukraine, what is the essential, the most important thing for the relationship between China and Europe and France? Firstly, we have a very weak position about the study of the future. You have plan, your plan is clever, and it will be done. We have no plan really in France, a bit, but not enough, and so we have no plan in Europe. So we can discuss with our partner about the future. And it's very important to have this discussion. Even our plan could be fake. Even it is very important to have the same vision. In French, we have sentences from a big writer with Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. To love is not to look at face to face, is to look in the same direction. We need to look in the same direction between France and China. In the past, we have a lot of technologies, and the technology come to China. And China now has more technologies than us. So I think the question between us is not to protect each of us by tariff, but it's to enough to have a new policy about partnership, to have a balanced development. In Europe, right now, we are thinking, the question is what we call local content. If a Chinese car wants to come in Europe, it must have some local product in it. We need to have this vision because nowadays, in this quite moving world, we need the success of our customer. We don't win alone. We need the success of our partner. We need the success of our customer. If we need the success of our China can't be the king of the car everywhere. No. Maybe they can be stronger, but maybe they have to help some country to have also a part of the success. That's the reason we develop this idea of local content. But to have local, we need to have confidence. We have to have discussion. Right now, it's very difficult. We have everywhere in the West countries something like a China bashing. You know, there is a lot of people who are not agreed to work with China. There is a lot of propaganda in it. And we know where come from this propaganda. But it's difficult to have this relationship to be confident with China. I know China for 40, my first trip in China was 55 years. So I've seen a lot of ladies here, Chinese lady. I know China before you. But I don't know China a lot because when you know something, it's very small things. But I think that we need to have this confidence to think together the future. And the future is to share technologies. You know, I don't forget that in 2008, where we are in big difficulties about financial crisis, we have the help of China. Why? China has understood it's not the interest of China to have Europe too weak. So we have to balance this development, to have a vision of strategy. It's not the interest of China to have Europe too weak, but it's not the interest of Europe to fight every day China. We are together in the world, and there is no balanced world without partnership, some confidence between China and Europe. So our difficulties right now is that our power, our leadership is split between Brussels and capitals. And Brussels is in charge of the market, in charge of the economy. And if we are talking about big companies, when Mr. Xi Jinping discusses with another leader, he can discuss with the support of the big Chinese company, and we can develop that, we can do that, and so on. In France, when we are talking about the future, we are talking about politics, but if we need the participation of a big company, it's a question of Europe. And it's Brussels, Madame von der Leyen, who is the decider. So it's very complicated. Of course, democracy is complicated. And we do love to live in such a model, but we understood it's a very difficult model. And now we need to have a sharing of the future and to imagine a new exchanges, more balance. And that's the reason why Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Macron in December decide a new politics. It's to promote French exportation to China, but to promote Chinese investment, industrial investment in France, but to share also technologies, not only investments in no more questions, but to share technologies. So I hope you understand my English, but that's okay? Okay, I will keep on running. So that's the reason why we need to have this common vision of the future. And if it's possible, with a lot of people there, I have to discuss what is our vision of the trade in 1940. And after that, we can define our policy, but not fight every day, not China bashing, not Europe bashing. We are a very strong country, we are a very friend country, and we have to share our future. And that's our responsibility to work together, to understand. So it's very difficult right now because in France, but I think it's the same thing in China. We don't know the reality of the European civilization, of the Chinese civilization. For example, in our country, unification, it's not a value, it's a means. We make union to play football. We make union to have a very big victory for our company. Union is a means. In China, union is an absolute value. We need to be unified. And if you are unified, you are guilty. In France, if you have rebel, you are like a hero. When I was young, I was chairman of a big district. There is a beautiful city which is called La Rochelle. And we make an advertising campaign. La Rochelle, the rebel, because in France, to be a rebel, to be strong. So in China, to be a rebel is to be guilty. United, union is a value for you, it's a mean for us. There is a lot of things like that. So we need to have more knowledge of each other. And that's the main point nowadays. A lot of people are talking about China in Europe, never been in China. So I think it's a problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Prime Minister Wang. Prime Minister Gentiloni, is there anything you would like to respond to Prime Minister Wang? And let me ask you about the goal of Europe wanting to achieve strategic autonomy. What does that actually mean for the European Union? And how can Europe achieve that strategic autonomy while remaining open to Asia and China at the same time?
Well, in a certain sense, achieving strategic autonomy is trying to answer to the difficulties and the weaknesses that Prime Minister Raffarin was signaling. Because we have to know what, well, of course you know, but just for discussion, what this European project is. The European project was born as a project for peace, meaning that we had for many, many decades wars among European countries. And these wars became at least twice world war. Then, 8 years ago, a very important project was born. The idea of not only stop the wars among European countries, but to build something on this peace. And gradually, we shared resources, we shared market, we shared currency, we shared laws, regulation. So fantastic. It's rather unique in the world that you have this kind of integration of common project among different countries and countries that were fighting each other for many, many decades, maybe centuries. Then at a certain point, I think we came to an inflection point because yes, the European Union is, if we look to statistics, is a very big thing. We are more or less ranking second, third, or even first in whatever statistic you can mean. From PPP, we are second after China. GDP, we are second after GDP per person, we are second after the US. On trade, we are first. On export, we are second after China. So, a big, big thing. But during these times, we confused the size of the market with the power of the market. And in the world we are today, if you confuse the size of the market with the power of the market, at the end you are a weak actor. And this is what this strategic autonomy means. You can't preserve your strength in the markets if you are not also a geopolitical actor. The two things need to go together. If there is only the size of the market without geopolitical strength, you will be coerced by other subjects. And this is what a couple of big wake-up calls for Europe came to wake up all of us. The war in our borders, the invasion of Ukraine, and President Trump election. Not because President Trump changed structural things, he probably only accelerated structural things, but the messages were very clear. So now working for this strategic autonomy means, first, having a common defense. Not easy, but we are doing this. This morning I was reading in FT that a plant of Volkswagen is transforming it from cars to missiles. I don't know if it's a good news, but in any case, it's something that is happening. And my take is that this should be coordinated at European level. We don't need each and every country to have its own process. Then this means to build European champions, to scale the financial markets, to address our weaknesses in competitiveness, to change the idea that was the basis of the EU integration, that only market and competition among companies was sufficient for development, for competitiveness. You leave the markets doing their job, and you will have stronger European champions, stronger companies. This is not the case in this world. It was the case. I remember very well Ronald Reagan in his electoral campaign saying, "Read my lips, no more state." No, but this is no more the case, even not in the US. The US are strongly subsidizing and intervening in the economy. And this should be also from our European Union. Does this mean that we will have a confrontational EU in the new global order? Not at all. I fully subscribe what Raffarin just said. We need cooperation. We were born for cooperation. So this project of peace, if it becomes a stronger power, will be a stronger power for peace. But to do so, we have to change. A famous sentence in Europe says we cannot be the only herbivore in a world of carnivores. I don't know if this is a nice sentence. Maybe it's not a nice sentence. But for sure, we need a European power, and we need this power not for confrontation, but for peace. Thank you.
But can Asia and China play a role in supporting Europe's desire to be strategically autonomous and to be an independent power for peace? Is that possible, or does it mean the EU is going to be more insular and focusing more on its own companies and less welcoming of investment from this part of the world?
No, I don't think that this could have any good conclusion with protectionism. We are an open economy. We don't have I'm not saying that the US are protectionist, but for sure the US have an internal market and an internal capacity of consumption that is also their point of strength. For us, we need an open economy. We need trade. We need cooperation with ASEAN, with China, with Asian countries. This is what the European Union is about. So if you build on this structure more geopolitical strength, you are not contradicting what Europe is conceived for. And it is conceived to be an open economy and to build together good relation on technology and on trade. Not easy. We all know that we have deficit in trade with China, for example. Can we manage this? We can manage this. The European Union has overall a surplus in trade. A small surplus, larger with US, and a deficit with China. It's a balance. But, of course, the US tariffs are rerouting part of Chinese export towards ASEAN and Europe. Is this only a threat? Yes, could be a threat for European industries. But I think we can manage these threats if we negotiate, if we try to reset EU-China trade relations. We have a good, very good opportunity, I think. Of course, we have to share trade and investments, trade and technologies, trade and AI. This is what politicians, old or new leaders, should do now. Now, in the coming years, we are defining the perspective of this European power working for peace.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Prime Minister Gentiloni. Andrew, is there any comment that you want to follow up on based on what our panelists said? And I want to specifically ask you about green hydrogen and green ammonia. Where do we stand on the economics of this if we're talking about investing in a sustainable and renewable future? Here in China, I think the thinking is there's going to be an integrated ecosystem of green hydrogen plus green ammonia plus green methanol. That's what China is trying to build. But from your perspective, where does the economics stand on that? And where is the green frontier, by the way, right now? The ship.
The Green Pioneer is, I think, heading its way to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and it's running on green ammonia. So that is the shipping fuel. The world needs about 800 million tonnes of it, and there's a very large group called the International Maritime Organization, which last year was voting to send the shipping industry basically green by 2050. And that was sabotaged in a last-minute attack by the United States, not based on any arguments, was it good or bad, it was just that it wasn't politically digestible for the US president, who didn't want to see the largest, most international industry consuming huge amounts of energy, the shipping industry, going green. That will roll ahead regardless, because particularly in this world of completely unreliable gas supplies, people will look for new energy which is completely reliable, which is sovereign, which is a weapon of peace, which can be made anywhere, not just in particularly in terrorist states. So the argument for new energy in molecules, ammonia, hydrogen, whatever it is, has just built more strongly, particularly since the war in Iran. Economically, it comes down to the cost of the electron. And can electricity be produced at a cheap enough scale that automatically makes converting that into a molecule, into what we call green gold, or green oil, which is ammonia. And the answer to that is yes, but it's improving day by day. And Fortescue itself is very enthusiastic about the prospects of hydrogen, very enthusiastic about the prospects of ammonia even more, because the difficulty with hydrogen as the universe's smallest molecule is that it's difficult to store and can be difficult to transport in bulk unless through a pipe. However, you convert it to ammonia by adding nitrogen to it, and it becomes very common technology, and within a cubic meter of ammonia is more hydrogen molecules than you'll get in a cubic meter of hydrogen. And you'll think, well, how's that possible, Andrew? It's possible because the nitrogen molecule is so big compared to the hydrogen molecule that specific gravity compresses the hydrogen molecule. So ammonia becomes a very efficient carrier of that miracle fuel, which when you burn it, creates an enormous amount of energy. It's super light and converts back to water. What's not to love? And so that is the super fuel of the future. China and the rest of the world is cracking this nut. And anyone who votes against hydrogen will be voting against the tide. The tide is going to come in.
Andrew, real quick answer from you. How concerned are you about climate skepticism? Because it's made its way to your country as well, and what it means for renewables. Real quick answer on that.
There's just no argument that global warming is upon us. I mean, I can see it throughout the world's oceans. I've invited President Donald Trump to dive with me on the Great Barrier Reef, on the Ningaloo Reef, to come and visit the millions of hectares which we own in Australia, watch what's happened in the last 25 years. It's absolutely happening. But the answer isn't, and my kids get really cross with me about this, and say, Dad, you've got to prosecute the argument as a philanthropist, as a scientist, as a conservationist, as an environmentalist. But a part of the world, a large part of the world, isn't listening. The argument must be prosecuted on the economics. And therefore, Fortescue's proving it, that first green grid, when it runs a massive industrial company without any help from the fossil fuel sector, 100% green, and lowers its cost by several dollars a tonne. We produce 200 million tonnes a year. We mine 1 billion tonnes a year. So you drop your cost by several dollars a tonne, real money, baby. And so we're going to be able to talk that to the drill, baby, drill language we hear from the White House and say, well, on economics, baby, we're going to win this war. So what about you join us?
Great. Thanks for that, Andrew. I'm going to ask a question to Jack, and then I'm going to open up for questions from the audience, okay? So get your questions ready. But Jack, let me ask you one final question from my end.
Yeah.
In terms of China's innovation ecosystem, many people have compared the Chinese market to a gym. How do you see international companies better maybe plugging into China's innovation ecosystem to make themselves more competitive on the global stage?
It's interesting. You know, the cleverest man in the room is the one that knows he's not. And that's me right now. I could ask about 40 questions to what Andrew just said, trying to figure out what you just said. But I think if you look at technology and you look at what's happening, there's one thing that no one's talking about which shocks me to the core, and it's quantum. And whoever controls and figures out quantum controls the world. And it's as simple as that. Quantum is the power of the future. And if you neglect it or you don't know it and you're not spending time on it, you're going to be in trouble. And if you look at Andrew in the energy field, we picked robotics because we found that we could solve a solution. So we're problem solvers. So we looked at, okay, here's the brilliance in China and here's the possible weakness. But when it comes to quantum, quantum is speed. And people just kind of neglect speed and don't really think much of it. But speed is, I could grab you without you even knowing. I could talk to you without, that movement of speed is so important. So if you look at energy, what is energy going to be in 7 years' time when quantum is ready? You don't know. Because the periodic table is about to change forever. And the compounds that we know today are going to change for quantum. But quantum will feed into AI, and AI will be able to analyze and figure out what is happening. So if you look at AI technologies and you look at agent systems, it picks the agent and it highlights the agent that it needs. That layer that I talked about earlier of energy, quantum, AI, and robotics, if you look at it when it lights up, they all have different times. So quantum will be able to expedite the energy and change the energy. Then it will go to the brain to figure it out, but then it needs action and movement. So where are China in that layer? Robotics, number one. AI, a year and a half ago, they said China were a year and a half behind in AI. And then DeepSeek came out and everyone said to me, can you believe DeepSeek? I said, yeah. 6 months ago, I could believe DeepSeek. If you don't know, you're not here, you don't know what China's doing. Now I believe China are ahead in AI by about a year. And then you go to quantum. It's very hard to know that answer. But I would say the Americans and the Chinese are very similar in that area. But someone is going to be ahead at certain times. And then you look at the energy. Well, I believe China are ahead in number one in energy, in renewable energy. And being able to understand how to do that, how to get it in, how to be able to work that with partners. Now, when I say number one, it doesn't mean that China are going to be the leader in every single area. That's not what I mean. I mean, it's innovation and spirit. So if you want to know the layer cake, that layer that I'm talking about is not a sector. So you're not talking quantum as a sector. That is literally the layer in every single sector of tomorrow. Andrew's sector, my sector, mining, all of these, everything's going to change. Do you have to spend 200 million to see what's downstairs? No, because everything's about to change. You can't know any of that unless you come to China and try and have a connection with the Chinese in that field. If you try and stay away, you'll lose out. So that's what we're doing with the robotics. We're seeing what is the strength and the weakness. And I saw certain weaknesses. And we're trying to now say, okay, when I say humanoid robotics is a solution to take over what a human is doing, right? It's not what it looks like a person. Because I don't want 4 of me in my house. I want 20, 30 different robotics doing little things, making my bed, cooking my food. You know, these are the things that actually work. So, you know, in textiles, in kitchens and bars, we're working with people now to say, what is your want and need? Give us the data labeling, give us the access, and we're going to save you fortunes. Over that period, we'll save you fortunes. And that's because of the innovative spirit of China to go, right, I've realized that solving that humanoid robotic solution is the key to the robotic solution. So this is an exciting time for me, but I think if you're looking at the evolution of technology, and especially when it comes to AI, we're working at LEC AI, we're working at, same again, trying to solve the problems. So we created a product called Donnie, which is an executive cognitive brain. It's a layer that understands the entrepreneur. It starts to feed out the memory of what the entrepreneur wants to do. Then the other layer is a shed skin of that brain. And it's building what it knows that the entrepreneur wants. And then it has the orchestra, the conductor of agents. But it's not me saying what the SOPs are in those agents. It's the AI that's hearing what I'm trying to do. And then the layer of hierarchy, rather than just agents doing it. Everyone's talking about OpenClaw and these other things. That's access. I don't want access. I want to be the best in that access. I want the best agent. And those systems are going to create opportunities for entrepreneurs to be able to do a lot more business. So it's an exciting time in technology, and you can't do it without China, is the answer.
Great, thanks for that, Jack. Perhaps for next year's Boao Forum, we're going to have a panel on quantum. But let me open it up to the floor real quick. Mr. Ambassador, over to you first. Let's bring a mic.
Thank you. I'm Jaime Flor Cruz. I've lived and worked in China for 50 years as a student and a foreign correspondent until I took up my current posting as the Philippine ambassador in China. My question is about global trade and protectionism. I remember some 30 years ago when China was just emerging as the factory of the world, the Chinese complained of pricing and fair trade, and the foreign counterparts are saying, no, 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 we follow free trade principle. Fast forward to today, roles have changed. Thanks to China's innovation and strategic planning, China is now leading in renewable energy, AI, and other technology. And the Europeans, especially, are complaining of fair trade. And now the Chinese are saying, no, 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 we follow free trade. So how do you square the circle or circle the square? How do we achieve, what measures aside from local content, as you mentioned, what measures can we take to make this a fair and free global trade and achieve the concerted unilateralism that Mary referred to? Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, would you like to address this question to Prime Minister Gentiloni or Mari? Mari.
Well, Mary and then
Okay, Mari, how
Prime
about
Minister.
you take a crack at this question first.
Yeah, I think, first of all, free trade never was just about free trade. There was always rules about how to have free and fair trade, right? So I think the first part of the answer would be you have the instruments within the WTO to enforce fair trade. Of course, it's been weakened because of what the US has done. In the past, if you have a problem, you can still go to the dispute settlement. Even us as a small country, Indonesia, we have taken the US to dispute settlement and we won, right? But that doesn't, it's weakened. But we still can do the trade remedy instrument because this is exactly one of the issues we face in the region is about so-called excess capacity or the surge of imports, not just from China, but as global economic slowdown, US markets being shut down, there's excess capacity coming into our markets. You can address that with so-called trade remedies. That's the best way to do it rather than increasing protection or discriminating against certain countries, right? But it only works to a certain extent. If you now then think about, what your first question to me was, I think we should resist increasing protection against each other. We can conduct so-called industrial policy to try to develop our own competitiveness. But we've got to do it in a way which is, sensible and addressing the competitiveness issue. Like local content requirement, just for the sake of local content requirement, it's not going to work. Unless it's done in a way, a part of a roadmap of where you want to be in the supply chain, for instance. There is a lot of discussion today about industrial policy, how to conduct it in a way which is not going to be leading to unfair trade or distort trade. So I think we can do many things to increase the competitiveness of a country, but we should not do it at the cost of distorting trade and investment between each other.
Okay, thank you for that, Mari. Unfortunately, we are all out of time. That is my fault, but there's a lot more questions from the floor, so unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. Fantastic insights. Thank you to all of our panelists. My hope, at least, is we do not sleepwalk into a self-fulfilling prophecy of fragmentation in this world, and that shaping a shared future is important for all of us and for future generations to come. A round of applause for our panelists. Enjoy the rest of your day here in Boao.